live webinar on literature review writing. So we welcome all the participants for today's webinar. I wish all the participants a happy Navratri. Hope all of you are having a good time during this festive season. So we are waiting for more participants to join us. So once they are in, we will start the webinar briefly. In the meantime, I would request all the participants, whoever have joined the session as of now, to sit back, relax, and enjoy this webinar. I hope you have enjoyed our previous webinars on different other topics. So we will be starting the literature review writing webinar shortly. Now, before even we start about the webinar in detail, this webinar is being conducted by research graduates. This webinar is being conducted by research graduate. So let me give you a brief idea of who we are and what do we do. Research graduate is the best PhD and master's consulting company. We help research scholars all throughout the world in a variety of research works. It could be any of them. If you want a topic to be selected, you want a proposal to be written, or it's a review paper or a research paper or thesis writing, irrespective of whichever of the categories to it may belong to, we are here to help you. If you are a master's student and you want to help us out with your dissertation, we are here to help you out with it. In many of the cases, many of the students finish the thesis or paper or the dissertation, but they are stuck at editing and proofreading. If you are stuck with editing, proofreading, and formatting as well, we can do it for you. So the list of the services that we provide are put forth here. Topic selection, then proposal writing, review paper writing, research paper writing, thesis writing, master's dissertation writing, statistical analysis, editing, proofreading, and formatting. So maybe any of these aspects that you have, we could always be of help for you. So do not feel hesitant about what is your query. You please come back to us, and then we will be helpful for you in any of the desired format. So please remember that your query you might think is minuscule or might not be important, but please put it forth to us. Irrespective of however is your query, we are here to help you out. So having said that, we cater to both national as well as international students, so it should not be an issue per se as what exactly, where exactly are you from. So we do for many of the areas, particularly like biology, chemistry, and others. So if you are not sure whether we can help you or not, so you in your related area, please do write back to us. We will go through your query and then we'll reply you back appropriately. So research graduate has been established with the sole purpose to help PhD students as well as master's students in order to finish their work successfully and get it published or get it submitted to the university. So in that way, we would ensure that you will have all your queries being answered, and we give end product as the way you expected us to give you. So please don't hesitate. Please do write to us. And if there is any aspect, if any of the service has not been listed here, but you're still interested in it, please do communicate to us. And then, we will go through it and tell you whether it is feasible for us to do or it is not feasible for us. So how do you contact research graduate? You can contact research graduate on this email ID, info@researchgraduate.com. There's a WhatsApp or a phone number which you can use for communication. You can also use our website, which is researchgraduate.com, for all the particular works. So having said that, I would say that all the participants who are all the participants who are in for today's webinar, as well as the previous participants who might be not be in a position to, attend it, but you would like to collect the PPT and recordings, that please go through our webinars, which will be a useful resource for you. If you are planning to start any of the aspects, please do contact us back if you have queries. So having said that, a warm good afternoon to all the participants. Let us start now with our webinar officially on literature review writing. So today's webinar focuses on literature review, its different kinds and how to write it out. So a warm good afternoon to all the participants. And so let us now jump into the main content and start with our webinar. Now, before even I start the webinar, let me explain to you how the webinar has been organized and how we are going to go ahead with it. We shall first start discussing about what is literature review writing. What exactly is the definition of literature review writing? Then we talk about what is the scope of the review writing, what is the purpose to do it or necessity. Then how do we do literature review? So that we do it in a short way, because we are going to discuss it later also in detail. Then when we are talking of literature reviews, they are of different kinds that you have. So what are the types of literature reviews that you have? Traditional, then you have reviews, traditional papers, review papers, rapid reviews, and systematic literature reviews. We have much more added. I have given a list of some of it in the contents as such. Then we talk about how to write literature review. So how do you search for the relevant literature? How do you evaluate the sources? How do you identify the themes, gaps, and debates? Outline the structure and how you write it. So these are the 5 key steps which we are going to talk about. Then how to differentiate between the various kinds of reviews. What is the difference in each of them? What are the differences while writing each of the reviews? What are the important points that are to be considered while writing, and the features of a good literature review? So this is the gist of the whole presentation that I'm going to have it today. So we will, start with each one of them, and we work out selectively with each one of them and go ahead with it. So having said that, let us now start with what is literature review writing and why exactly we do it. Now, let me request all the participants that we have a live question answer session at the end of the webinar. We will answer all the questions to you at that time. So please post the questions at that time. You sit back and relax the presentation first. We might cover many of your questions, and still you have doubts about them. You post them at that time, and then we will work it out definitively. Then, having said that, let me start with what is literature review writing. As the name itself suggests, literature review is a concise summary of the literature. It's a comprehensive summary of previous research on a selected topic. So the literature review surveys a large number of, components, which includes books, research articles, and other publications, such as, sometimes you also cover patents, and you have even online grey literature, which we will come about it later. Now, the review has the following aspects. It enumerates the the available idea. It describes it very clearly. It summarizes the entire aspects pertaining to a topic, and it objectively evaluates and clarifies the previous research. So in sense, it gives a theoretical base for the researcher. If in the present participants, many of them I understand are aspirants for thesis work or for paper writing. In which cases, if you are going for the thesis work, it will give a theoretical base and a probable research question based on which you can proceed ahead and work it out. So this is how it defines it. The literature review is basically a critical review of published information on a topic by other researchers. Many a times, literature review might include the research methodology and a bit of the findings, if not complete. The literature review expands the knowledge base, which the researcher already has, and it tries to show how good is he in understanding the topic even before he wants to do research on the topic. Now, where does it go? Where exactly is literature review used? In case of papers, research papers, if you are submitting, literature review will be the part of introduction, whereas in case of thesis and dissertations, LR will be a separate section in itself. And if you are writing exclusive review papers, then it will be the complete aspect of it. So where does it go? And how much will it be will depend on what exactly are you trying to publish. Are you publishing a research paper? Are you publishing a review paper? Or is it for thesis? Then, having said that, let us now further proceed with literature review writing. Now, as I was speaking of, the literature review mainly is associated with collecting data from previous publications. In the process, you are acknowledging someone else's work. And when you are presenting it to a reader, you are assuring the fact that you have read the complete details about the topic in the given field, and that's why you are proceeding ahead with it. It gives an idea of what is called as that the work has been well conceived. So the literature review, if you present, it shows that you have a very good idea and knowledge of the field. Now, it is assumed that by mentioning a previous work in the field of study, the author has got all these aspects, which include accurate reading, evaluation, and assimilation of the work. That means you are a sort of like a mini expert in that field pertaining to that topic. A literature review classically serves as a landscape for the reader. So when you are providing a landscape, then you can put in the picture that you want based on the landscape that you have. So once you have the landscape and you're telling to the reader, look, I have this particular thing which has been done, and so I'm proceeding ahead with this, then it becomes very beautiful for the reader and it's very clear and concise as such. Then, now this is what is a summary which of the literature review. There are certain aspects of literature review which have to be considered when you are writing, right? That one part is that it is not an annotated bibliography, meaning you are not just collecting all the papers and you are making a bibliographical analysis like this particular paper speaks of this speaks of this. That is not literature review. It is not a literary survey, meaning you just don't put the author's dates and you just put in the data that it has been there. Now, background information is provided in literature review, but the background information or explanations of important concepts are essential, but they are not the whole piece. For example, if you are defining about malaria may be important to a paper with respect to malaria-bearing mosquitoes, then it's not malaria which is important for the paper, but it's a description of malaria-bearing mosquitoes, which is important. So speaking in extent a huge amount about malaria and not talking about the mosquitoes has no relevance. And literature review is not an argument for the importance of what you are researching. So yes, you have to present it in a proper and methodological manner, but it should not be a sole argument and it should not be biased trying to tell that my point is only correct as such. So, and hence it's important that you remember that it is drafted in a proper manner. Now, the purpose of literature review is to convey to the reader the knowledge that has already been existing and the ideas which have been there and the ideas that you have. In this way, you are trying to connect with the researchers all throughout the world and trying to say that I also belong to the same community as you guys are. Now, you have to give proper examples for your research objective, the problem or issue you are discussing, and you put forth your argument in a specific manner. However, it's always important to remember that literature review is not a descriptive list of the material which is available or a set of summaries which is available, but it is far more beyond than that. Now, here is what is in a gist that is presented. Whenever a literature review is written, what exactly the readers expect? They expect the context by which to read your report. So they are expecting clarity of what exactly you are presenting in the report. What is the background that you are telling, and whether the approach that you're following is valid or not. Then they look at what has been written. Is it related to your problem? The solutions that have been proposed, they are good solutions or they are not. Now be relevant and explain how and why it is. Whenever you are writing the literature review, it's important that you connect the paragraphs properly. You make sense of what you are writing so that the audience understands what exactly is going on. Remember that the audience is academic, and hence the audience is like they have idea of the topic. They are not just like new people who are just sitting there who are new or naive to the field as such. So this is what the reader expects when you present a literature review, and hence you have to remember these aspects and then accordingly go about with it. So having said that, what is the scope of literature review? Now, the scope of the literature review will depend upon the field and the discipline, or rather the discipline in which you're working. If it is a medical field, the scope is different. If it is humanities, the scope will be different. However, one important point to be remembered with literature review is it should be comprehensive or selective, meaning you should explain all the various works that have been done in a concise manner, or rather in a precise manner, and get out the best aspects associated with it. Then it becomes easy for the reader to understand what exactly is going on. The literature review can be a part of larger work, or it could be a part of standalone article. Now, it can be like even the scope will vary depending on if it is a literature review for a thesis, literature review for a dissertation, or is it a proper paper. So the scope will be defined based on how you define to write it and what exactly is for your writing. Is it for a paper, for a thesis, for a dissertation, or is it a standalone article which you are doing? And hence the scope will vary depending upon the necessity. Now, in any of the cases, the scope of the literature review lies in the points which have been highlighted in red here. It should be in a position to compare and contrast at the same time. Always remember that the literature review is unbiased in most of the cases. So when you are writing it, you should not just compare whatever is there, but you should also contrast and bring out the stark differences so that you can get out with research gaps. Then it identifies the areas of consensus and dissent. So again, which means that what is the consensus among the various reviews? What is a common point between all the literatures that we are trying to get out and use? Then it talks about the gaps which are existing. So you come to your point of what is it which we can do in that form of research here. If there are any trends, themes, methodologies, theories, or any specific analysis which is iterative, meaning which is repeating itself in the papers, that needs to be brought out clearly. You have to discuss the major point or the debate in the field, meaning all the papers accept on one point that something is not working and that something is working. You have to get out such points clearly, and then you have to work it out as such. And after that, it's important that what are the strengths and weaknesses of the various review papers that you have done. So that is equally important to be worked out with. So in a nutshell, you have to get out everything: the strengths of the paper, the weaknesses of the paper, the overall strength of the field, what is the common point, which is nothing but consensus, and then you come out with what are the weaker aspects or what are the drawbacks associated. Having said that, we come to the purpose of literature review. So why exactly do you have to do a literature review? That's a very good point. A literature review is a prerequisite if you are starting your research work. If you want to start your research work, you need to know what exactly is the statement of research. For that, you need to do first a review of the literature and then come out with the research question. The literature review analyzes relationships and connections among different works, which is important. Now, it differs from the traditional annotated bibliography because it's not bibliography. You are not just copying and pasting the sources and working it out. You have to give appropriate descriptions, you have to criticize it, and you also have to support it. It is not a mislist of the papers that you have collected and just it's a summary. So by by you publishing or by writing the major works which have been done, and by being a major critic for each of the review papers that have been published or research papers published, you lay out a draft for the way you do your thesis. You lay out a draft for the way you have come to write your research paper and how you have selected the topic per se. So, analysis of major works and subsequent scholarship, the literature review lays out the evolution of scholarship on a topic and establishes a context for further research. That means you are laying what is called as the framework for your research plan. That's the reason why literature review becomes very important as such. Now, it helps you to explain why topic is important and place your research in theoretical context, which is very aptly said. Now, it also tells if there is any redundancy existing in the field. What is it? You bring out by research by literature review. It tells what are the existing problems, how they have been sorted out, and it also tells of the new problems and possibility of future research. The literature review allows you as a researcher to enter into ongoing conversation with other scholars. So by writing a literature review or by publishing a literature review, you now tell to the entire scientific community, yes, we have a novel idea. They also go through it and they also, approve whatever has been happening. So having said that piece about the purpose of the review, here is a summary of exactly as what is the purpose of literature review. It helps you to attain a good knowledge of the field of inquiry. Then the common methodologies existing in the field you get to know so that you can frame your methodology for research. Then proposed research is really needed or not. You justify it. Then it helps to narrow a problem. It helps in generation of hypothesis, research questions, or questions for further studies. It commences a long-term study of interest, which is nothing but your research area, in which you are going to do thesis for a long time. So, now having said it, we have discussed about the scope, purpose of literature review. Let us just briefly discuss about how to do literature review. Any literature review that is done consists of introduction, body of the review, and conclusion. When you are writing the introduction, these are the points which you have to remember and you have to summarize. First, the introduction has to give a proper topic. The general topic or area of concern has to be introduced. What is that we are trying to review? The review is based on a specific topic and hence you have to give that particular topic. Then you have to point out overall trends in what have been published about the topic. What is a trend or pattern relevant to the topic that has been published? If there are conflicts existing in theory, methodology, evidence, and conclusion in all the published papers, you have to come about with them and you have to tell what are the conflicts and what are the problems existing with it. Then you have to clearly mention the point of view for literature review. That is, you have to give the clear purpose statement in the introduction as why you are reviewing the literature, what is the necessity. In that way, you justify the topic. You have to explain the criteria on the basis of which you are selecting the literature and on the basis of which you are reviewing the literature. If certain specific papers which are important have not been included, you can probably even justify why some of them have not been included and what is the exact problem associated with it. Then, having said that, we move to how to write the body of literature. When you're talking of the body of literature, it includes grouping the research studies together. This we will be discussing in detail when we talk about how we are writing the literature part. You have to group the research studies. The grouping could be done on any common aspects, which could include that they are common qualitative or quantitative approaches. They are certain common conclusions associated with all, or that the purpose or objective meets in all of them, or there's a chronology of discovery. Then, based on the grouping, you summarize each of the individual studies, and then you work on the merits and demerits of it. And hence, body of literature becomes critical, and it has to be grouped and identified in a proper manner. Now, when you are writing the body of literature, it is important that you compare the various literary sources. You connect each of the literary sources using strong umbrella sentences, which you use either in the beginning of the paragraphs, in the middle, as well as in the concluding statements. So you use like proper, signposts which indicate that the way you're connecting them, and you use the so what, and ideally the kind of so what summary sentences at intermediate points in the review in order to make the reader understand what exactly you are comparing and how you are analyzing. Then you write the conclusion part of the review. In the conclusion, you summarize and tell the major contributions that have been achieved in the field based on the body of knowledge obtained from the articles. Then you evaluate what is the current status of the topic based on the literature. Then you mention about the major flaws or major weakness existing in the field based on your study. And then you talk about your specific area or issue pertinent to future study. Okay, then you conclude by providing some insights into relationship between central topic of literature review and larger area of the study. And that is how you work it out and you get it done. So you point out the major methodological flaws or gaps, and then you conclude by providing insights into relationship between central topic of literature review and larger area of study as such. And hence it becomes useful in a way that you conclude in an effective manner. So this is the generalized literature review that you have, and you have these 7 steps of producing the literature review. First, you identify your question as what it is and how it is. Then you review your discipline style as what it is and how it is. Then you search the literature. Then you manage your references. Then you critically analyze and evaluate it out, and then you synthesize it, and then you write the review. So it is a cycle that you have, and with which you proceed ahead with it, and you work it out so that it is easier. So you first proceed with identifying question, getting the entire thing done, and then you work out based on it. So that is how you proceed, and that's how you work it out. So there are different kinds of literature reviews which are there as such and which are covered. So let us start focusing on each of the literature reviews and working out as what it is and how it is. So the different types of literature reviews that you have include traditional or narrative literature reviews. So when you say traditional or narrative literature reviews, we talk of the specific ones. Then you have scoping reviews. Then you have argumentative literature reviews. Then you have integrative literature reviews. Then you have theoretical literature reviews. Then you have systematic quantitative literature reviews, the Cochrane and Campbell collaborations. Yeah, sorry for the brief pause. Let me continue back with the types of literature review that we have. There are different types of literature reviews, which are traditional or narrative literature reviews. Then you have scoping reviews. You have argumentative literature reviews. You have theoretical literature reviews, systematic or quantitative literature reviews, Cochrane reviews, Campbell collaborations. The whole batch of literature reviews in research can be grouped into two of the different ones, which include traditional reviews versus systematic reviews. Systematic reviews are a different way of writing in itself when compared to traditional reviews as such. So, these are like another way of grouping it in in the formats that you see on for literature review on the databases and internet. You can also group them as systematic reviews, theoretical reviews, argumentative reviews, integrative reviews, historical reviews, and methodological reviews. So these are the various reviews that you have and which could be used as such. So we will talk in detail about each of them, what are these and how they are and how you do them out. Now, a traditional literature review is a narrative review, as how you call it. These kind of reviews are important for researchers and in academics because they offer a comprehensive, critical, and objective analysis of current knowledge on a topic. They are essential part of the research process because you first do the literature survey, then you propose the topic that you are going to use. A literature review will help you to identify patterns and trends in literature so that you can identify gaps or inconsistencies in a body of knowledge. Now, this helps you to develop a focused research question that justifies your research. So thus traditional literature reviews are what are the reviews which are written by, academic people. So they are the ones based on which you develop your thesis, you publish your thesis, as well as you work on your research papers as such. Now, this is how a traditional literature review is. It criticizes and summarizes a body of literature and draws conclusions about the topic in question. The body of literature is made up of relevant studies and knowledge that addresses the subject area. It's typically selective in the material it uses, although the criteria for selecting sources might vary. This is very useful for researchers because it summarizes a large volume of research in a given particular area and helps in synthesizing newer questions about it. So then we come to scoping reviews. A scoping review is nothing but you take a gist of the whole thing and you present it. Many a time scoping reviews are identical to systematic reviews, but they are not so much in detail. The purpose of the scoping review is to provide an overview of available research evidence and to say that there is a concept existing, but a scoping review never answers the question completely. It does not produce a summary answer to a discrete research question, like what information has been presented on this topic in the literature. Now, what exactly is the purpose or the question that you are trying to answer? You don't mention it out clearly in scoping review, but you try to answer the question broadly. Scoping reviews describe existing literature and other sources of information, commonly including findings from a range of different studies and clinical trials. And hence, scoping reviews per se become very important. The scoping studies aim to map the literature on a particular topic or research area and provide an opportunity to identify key concepts. These are like very fastly written so that policymakers can understand what's going on in a given area and they can come up with better ideas as such. Now, then argumentative reviews. Argumentative literature review, as the name itself implies, it is to present an argument and to defend it. However, these kind of reviews have a major drawback that they have a very high potential for bias, because the person who is writing it is trying to defend his point, and hence he might look only for loopholes or negative aspects in other papers. The purpose of this review is to develop a body of literature that establishes a contrarian viewpoint. When I say contrarian viewpoint, it means you are trying to present two opposite aspects. You are saying that this argument, like your viewpoint is correct, whereas the literature is going with something around in an opposite way. Argumentative approaches to analyzing the literature can be legitimate and important form of disclosure, which is seen as such. So then comes to integrative reviews. As the name itself suggests, integrative reviews, or the review method, it is a collection of the past empirical or theoretical research, combining it together and putting it, integrating to form one body of review which tells what exactly is going on. Integrative reviews are very useful in healthcare sector, particularly nursing science, where you can inform research practice and policy initiatives. When you do integrative review methods, you can have both experimental and non-experimental research being included. That is where it differs from systematic reviews. You can have both non-experimental part also included here for summarizing it. An integrative review is best designed for nursing. The review has both experimental and non-experimental parts, and the purpose of it is to define the concepts, to review the theories, to review evidence, and to analyze the methodological issues. In that way, it differs from systematic and other reviews that you even include non-experimental data here. Then, the best example for integrative review is provided here. The topic is like violence against women during COVID-19 pandemic, and you're doing an integrative review where you collect the data from both, newspapers, articles, as well as from published papers. The course of domestic and family violence, you collect the papers. The dynamics of domestic and family violence against women, that also you collect, and the recommendations and strategies for prevention of confrontation of these. So it has gone into 3 bits. First, what is the course it has followed, then what's the dynamics, and what are the recommendations. You integrate all of them, and then you write a review, and then you submit it out. Then we come to theoretical reviews. Theoretical review, the sole purpose is to concretely examine the theory that has been accumulated in regard to an issue, concept, or to a phenomena. The theoretical review establishes whatever is already existing. However, there are multiple theories associated with a particular topic. So you club all of them and you make one specific new hypothesis based on all these. But the important point here, what happens is theoretical reviews only summarize the existing theory and you get out with one final statement. But you can't make a definitive integrative research question based only on theoretical reviews. Often, this form is used to help establish a lack of appropriate theories or reveal the current theories. So it tries to tell that the existing theories or current theories are inadequate and you might need new or emerging research problem, but it doesn't tell what it is. The unit of analysis can focus on a theoretical concept or a whole theory or framework as such. Then this is the idea behind theoretical literature review. Sometimes you call it as theoretical literature framework also. It is based on the ideas. You framework you develop based on the concepts that have already been published. Whatever has been determined, you pick up those aspects and you see the statistical relation that's established and you make a framework. It is deductive and you just do theory testing here. You don't specifically talk of experimental aspects. Theoretical reviews compare how different theories address an issue. Scholarly writing that helps researchers to build and sharpen the conceptual focus. The source of theoretical literature review prepare the conceptual framework. So often theory leads to the conceptual framework. So that is how it goes with theoretical reviews as such. Then, what are systematic reviews? Now, of all which have been discussed till now, all of them are, more or less traditional in a way. Now, the entire literature reviews can be separated out into two major ones: traditional reviews and systematic reviews. Systematic reviews are highly organized reviews and they are iterative, meaning they will be repeating the same analytical method. Here you will have data, the data which is analyzed, and you present statistical significance of it. Now they are based on highly specific questions, wherein which you formulate the question, you search the literature, you synthesize data from the literature. While systematic reviews are most widely applied in biomedical or healthcare, they can also be used in areas where assessment of precisely defined subject would be helpful. An understanding of systematic reviews and how to implement them in practice is very crucial in the areas of healthcare, public health, and public policy making. So systematic reviews are altogether a different ball game, wherein which you have to work out in a different area in itself. Why we need systematic reviews? Here it is. There is humongous data in terms of clinical trials as well as in terms of the available data about treatments in healthcare and others. So it gives, in a nutshell, in a specific area, the summary of the huge amount of evidence that's available. Then it also helps to it evaluates and recommends what are the best trials that can be done based on the results. Then it is very concrete and precise, meaning if systematic review is clubbed with meta-analysis, then it becomes for sure that it can be implemented as such. So thus systematic reviews are very useful. Now, these are the differences which exist between systematic reviews and traditional reviews. Now, the first feature of the question is asked is many a time specific and traditional, but it's also broad, whereas systematic reviews have highly focused question. The sources and searches are multiple, whereas for traditional reviews, you don't define the source, you go through across in a defined manner. There is a selection criteria in systematic review. You don't consider all of them. You have inclusion and exclusion criteria. Traditional reviews have none. The appraisal is done. There's a critical appraisal which is done for this, and that is done by regulatory bodies, which is not there for traditional reviews. The data that is synthesized here is highly quantitative, and the quality of data is very superior when compared to narrative reviews. There could be bias, and there is a risk of bias in narrative or traditional reviews, which is missing in systematic because you use softwares for analyzing the risk of bias. Now, who performs the systematic reviews? Multiple disciplinary teams of people, which include clinicians, health service researchers, information scientists, statisticians, health economists, patients, and public involvement people who are involved in framing guidelines. All of them utilize the systematic literature reviews. The major body which handles systematic literature review is the Cochrane Library. It is the British Medical Journal, the BMJ Publishing Group, which hosts the library. It collects the various, literature reviews pertaining to systematic analysis and the meta-analysis from Medline and Embase. Now, the advantage of Cochrane Library is that it has the collection of entire thing that you want. You just have to pick and write it. There is no bias in this. The reviews published here are unbiased. The subject which is covered is clinical medicine reviews. They are highly indexed and they are updated quarterly. Okay, so thus Cochrane Library is like the Bible for systematic reviews in the field of medicine. Now, these are the particular databases which are integrated and are a part of the Cochrane Library. The Cochrane database of systematic reviews, the Central Register of Controlled Trials, the Methodology Register, the database of abstracts and review of effects, Health Technology Assessment Database, and NHS Economic Evaluation Database. It also contains information about Cochrane Collaboration and Cochrane Collaborative Review groups as well. Thus, it's very broad. If you have it here, you have the collection, you are done with it. Campbell Collaboration, on the other hand, is a sister initiative of Cochrane. It publishes what are called as Campbell Systematic Reviews. It's a non-profit organization which publishes systematic reviews based on the evidence. It's composed of coordinating groups of multiple databases which are involved in production of systematic reviews and evidence gap maps in diverse areas. Now, Campbell Collaboration, unlike Cochrane, is not just for healthcare professionals, it's also for professionals in education, crime, justice, social welfare, and social intervention. You have appropriate links to register your protocols, and then you can publish your reviews here. So having said this, we now come officially as how to write the literature review. Now, writing a literature review takes time, and it depends on what is the nature of the review you want to write and how much time do you have to write it. It involves finding relevant publications, critically analyzing them, and explaining what you found. There are 5 key steps involved in the whole process. First is searching for the relevant literature. Second is evaluating the sources. Third is identifying themes, debates, and gaps. Fourth is outlining the structure. And fifth is writing your literature review. We will discuss all the 5 of them in the same order in detail. And a good literature review doesn't just summarize the sources. These are the 3 points which are important. It is not just a summary of the sources. It analyzes the literature, it synthesizes the literature in your point of view, and critically evaluates to give the bigger picture of what is the status of the topic in the present field that you are proposing and what best could be done. Now, here are the steps to prepare the literature review. Step 1, you need to define your topic. You must define your topic and the components of your topic. Then step 2, you have to search for literature based on the topic. And here when you are doing, you use the keywords and you use the library catalogs, databases, various bibliographies to find materials. Then you evaluate what you have found. You read and evaluate what you have found in order to determine which material makes a significant contribution. Then you analyze and interpret the data, which is you provide a discussion of the findings and conclusions of the pertinent literature. So these are the basic steps which are written any time in literature review, and this is how is the structure of literature review. You write the introduction, you write the theoretical framework, you put in the subsections based on research questions or objectives, you make a conceptual framework, and then you do the summary. So all these aspects have to be covered in literature review if you are going for thesis writing, dissertation writing, or for research review papers. In case of research papers, literature review will be just a part of introduction, and hence you will have discussion of the papers and appropriate connection as such. Now, let us start with how to search for the relevant literature. Before you start searching for the relevant literature, it is essential that you clearly define the topic. If you don't define the topic clearly, then you can't search the proper literature, so you'll end up with so many papers, of which many of them are irrelevant. If you are writing the literature review section of a dissertation or a research paper, you will have to search for literature related to your research problem. For example, the question I ask here is, what is the impact of social media on body image among Generation Next to Generation Z? So if this is the research question, then you have a clearly defined topic which you are using. Based on this topic is what is your next step that you have to go about and that you have to summarize as such. So once you have the topic, you have to make a list of keywords that you have and how you have to use them. So you have to include key concepts of or variables you are interested in and list any synonyms and related terms. So the more the keywords, the better you have. They are what are called as Boolean operators. They are 3 of them, which include an, and, or. These mainly and or are called Boolean operators. These are used for doing the keywords combination searches, like you want to search cancer and curcumin, or cancer or curcumin, then you can filter it out appropriately. Here in this case, we have raised a question as what is the role of body, what is the role of the media on body image in Generation Z. The keywords that you can use for this search include social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok. Then you use body image, self-perception, self-esteem, mental health. Then you use Generation Z, teenagers, adolescents, and youths. So a combination of this you can use with and or with or, which are the typical Boolean operators, and you go ahead with them and search for the literature as such. Now, you use those keywords and start beginning to search for the sources. Some of the useful databases are listed out here, like Google Scholar is one very good one which you can use. Apart from Google Scholar, you can use JSTOR and EBSCO. If you are belonging to life sciences and biomedicine, then Medline and Embase are good ones. If for economics, it's Econolit. For physics, engineering, and computer science, you use Inspect. And for humanities, Project Muse is what is the library catalog that you have, which you could use. So depending on the field you are in, you can use any of them and you can get out with the appropriate literature. Then here are the literature search techniques that you have. So keyword search. So using the keyword, you can find relevant information from digital libraries, databases, or internet. So you use the keywords and get it out. Usually keyword alone is sufficient enough for getting most of the literature. Then you do what is called as chaining. Like you have collected a couple of references, you read those references and those references have citations for the previous work. So you begin with the first reference and then you go ahead with the next reference, which is from the existing reference. In that way, you make a chain of references, which will be good for your topic. Then you have browsing, which is nothing but you sit through, browse, you collect as much literature as you can. You collect books, articles, or any one of them, and you collect all of them which are relevant and you work it out. Then here is the next aspect for the search strategy. First, you identify the keywords and the search terms. Once you get it done, you select the relevant databases and resources based on the field you are in. You combine these search terms with Boolean operators, which are and or. Then you run searches. You collect the whole material and then you review it, and whichever is not relevant, where there's only just the term associated with the topic but not the real topic, you eliminate them and you get out with the final set of papers which you can use for the literature review per se. Then having said how to search, then comes the next question, how to evaluate and select sources. Now, this is very important. You have already collected it, but you need to evaluate it. Now, say, for example, for a literature review, you have collected 100 papers. You can't read all the papers on that topic and you can't, summarize them. If it is 30, 40, it's okay. But if it is 100 plus, then it's very difficult. Then you have to sort out and say which is relevant, you keep them, which is less relevant, you keep it for the later one. So whenever you collect the appropriate publication which you want to review, you talk or you see for the various questions which have been put forth here. What question or problem is the author addressing? The question or the problem is the author addressing what I want? Are the key concepts that I have which I want, are they covered or not? What are the key theories, models, and methods? Do they match with what I want? Are the results and conclusions justifying the topic which I want or not? If they are not, then you can't use that, particular paper you have collected. Then, how does the publication relate to other literature in the field? Is it same? Is it supporting the field? Or is it not supporting the field? How does the publication contribute to your understanding of the topic? Like, is it already adding to your existing knowledge or is it throwing new light? What are the strengths and weaknesses of each of the papers that have been published? These are the various questions which you have to think in mind when you are evaluating each of the review papers. Most importantly, the sources that you collect are credible. Credible meaning they should not be retracted papers. They should be having citations at least. If not a very high number, at least some citations, or it should have been a landmark paper in the area of interest you are in, pertaining to that particular topic, and that such landmark papers you should include while writing your literature review. In Google Scholar, there is citation review. The higher the citations for a paper, that means the more it has been read and accepted. If you have highly cited papers included in your review section, then your quality and the weight of your review increases automatically. In sciences, usually you review recent literature, not very old one, not more than 10 to 15 years. However, in humanities, history, and others, you can go back to old literature because the discipline is different and you might have to connect old ones with the new topics as such. Then, another important point, as you read, you should also begin to write. You take notes of the entire thing. Take notes which you can incorporate later. You keep a track of the sources, whichever you are reading. If you can't do it manually, you can use a citation generator and you can make a bibliography, annotated bibliography using the citation generator as such. But keep a track and take notes. Once you start taking the notes, it will become easy, since once you have the notes, you are making the body of the literature. Then we come identifying themes, debates, and gaps. Now, this becomes important when you are organizing and trying to write the body of literature. So it's important. You have, say, 50 or 60 papers. What is the common point among these and how do you connect them? You just can't present them independently and say, look, I have a literature review. Then that is just a literature survey and not a review. Based on your reading and notes, you look for trends and patterns among all the papers. Is there a recurrent theme across the various literature? Are there any debates, conflicts, and contradictions which you have? Do any of the sources disagree with one another or all are agreeing to the same point? Are any of the publications landmark publications that have influenced the way the field has changed? Then you have to include all such papers as such. Then what are the gaps that you have? Okay, you have read 60 papers. So what are the gaps that you have here? Are there weaknesses that need to be, have to be addressed? For example, so examples of trends and gaps in reviewing the literature on social media and body image, you observe that most of the research has focused on young women. There is an increased interest in visual aspects of social media. Though, however, it is correct, but it's only focusing on the young women. But you don't know if they are even elderly women who get affected by this, which is one of the drawback of the study. And the research is not complete because some of the visual platforms like Instagram and Snapchat have not been included. You talk of Facebook, TikTok, and others, Twitter as such, but Instagram and Snapchat also are there. So these are the inherent weaknesses of the study which you have to point out and identify them as gaps. Now, this is the way it goes. You evaluate the sources, you identify the theme and debate, then you mark the gaps, you outline the structure, and you start the literature review. Now, this is the flow chart for the entire process which I have been telling. Then, how do you make the outline of literature review? Now, before you start writing the body of literature review, or even you start doing introduction, then you come to body, you have to make an outline first. Only based on the outline, you can go ahead and do the remaining part. Now, there are various approaches to organizing the body of literature review. There are various approaches to organizing the body of literature review. Now, you should have a rough idea of what exactly is the strategy you have to start writing. There are different ways of doing it. One is chronological. This is the simplest approach that you have. Now, you trace the development of the topic over time, in which case you put the references in a chronological order and you're trying to make a flow. But however, you have to be careful when you're doing that. You just don't do a literature survey in chronological order, but it has to be fixed out in a proper manner. If you choose this strategy, be careful to simply list and summarize the sources in order, which is the most important thing. Then the second way is being thematic. Thematic meaning there's a recurrent theme which is there in all of them. So you organize your whole literature review into subsections and you write it based on the theme and you support it with the reviews. Then you have methodological. There is a common research methodology which you want to compare across the various ones. So if you draw your sources from different disciplines or fields that you use a variety of research methods, you might want to compare the results and conclusions that emerge from different approaches. Then you have theoretical. Theoretical meaning a literature review is often the foundation for theoretical framework. You have theories, you have models which are common to all of them. So you make the framework based on those and you present the literature review. So these are the various patterns that you have and which you use for working it out. Here are the approaches, which I already discussed is what is put forth in a diagrammatic format. So 1, thematic; 2, chronological; 3, methodological; 4 is theoretical. So it depends on which discipline you are and it depends on what exactly it is. So you can pick up any of them. It doesn't matter which pattern you pick up, but don't make it like a survey. You have to write it properly, you have to connect it properly, and it should look as your review and not just as, what people have published. So having said that, now let us come to writing literature review. Now, what are the different aspects that you have to consider while writing the literature review and how you go about with it? So first, for the introduction. Now, first and most important point, when you are writing the introduction, it should clearly establish the focus and purpose of literature review. Why exactly we are doing this should come out in introduction. If it is a part of dissertation or a thesis, it should be connected with your central research question and it should tell how it summarizes the research question with the scholarly context. If it is a paper you are writing, it mostly becomes a background. So you give the importance, discuss the scope of literature. However, if it is a review paper in itself, then you go like your other way you write your thesis. Then comes the body of literature. Depending on the length of your literature review, you can divide the body into several subsections. But everything you have to do based on a specific organized thing. It could be a theme, it could be chronology, or it could be methodology. As you write, you follow the tips. Now, remember, it's very important that you have what is called as a framework. You summarize the entire data which is obtained. And based on the opinions of the existing reviews, you synthesize and draft your own particular idea. So summarize and synthesize. That's the first important thing. Once you do the summary and synthesis, then you analyze and interpret. Don't just paraphrase whatever is the idea of other researchers. You try to write their opinion in your way such that it connects with your central question. You discuss the significance of findings in relation to literature as a whole. Then you critically evaluate the entire return thing, meaning you tell what are the advantages of this, then you tell what are the weaknesses of this. And you write in well-structured paragraphs wherein which you use transition words and topic sentences to draw connections, comparisons, and contrasts. Then after once you do that out, you come to conclusion. Once you have done the body of literature. In conclusion, you summarize the key findings you have taken from the literature. You emphasize and you signify them. If the literature review is a part of thesis or dissertation, show how your research is addressing the research gap in the field. If you are writing a standalone paper, you can discuss the overall implications of literature or make suggestions for future research based on the gaps you have identified. So you just not only just write the part in your way, but you also tell what next can be done in the field. And once you finish it, you get it edited and proofread it thoroughly before submitting the literature review. So these are the various aspects associated with writing the review, which we have connected in different sections of different parts of the today's webinar. We now come to various kinds of reviews. What are the differences between them? Now, as I was telling earlier also to all the participants, the easiest way of classifying reviews is into two, traditional versus systematic. The bulk of the reviews, as you can see here, fall into traditional literature reviews. A small fraction of them are systematic reviews, and a subsection of it are systematic reviews with meta-analysis. Thus, systematic reviews are highly specific and they don't fall into this category. They have to be written in a defined format, but traditional reviews are different per se as such. Now, what exactly is the difference between a systematic review and literature review? We talk about in different parameters. Now, in a definition way, a systematic review is highly organized and it has a central question which is very specific that is addressed. In a literature review, it is more or less, it's qualitative and you do have a question here, but it could be broadened as such. The goal of a systematic review is to answer a clinical question without any bias. For a literature review, it's just to provide a summary. The question asked is very clear. It does include its own, criteria for consideration. In a literature review, it's a generalized topic. The components of a systematic review include pre-specified eligibility criteria, a systematic search strategy, assessment of the protocol, and validating the findings and interpreting them and making a reference list which is appropriate. For literature review, it is introduction, methods, discussion, conclusion, and reference list. The number of authors for a systematic review usually is multiple, whereas for literature review are few. The timeline for systematic review is very, very high. It goes anywhere between 1 year to 18 months, whereas literature reviews traditionally are done within few months. Now, the requirements vary here. It is systematic reviews are, a thorough knowledge of the topic. They include statistical analysis where meta-analysis is there. However, for a literature review, it's just the understanding of topic. You don't need to have any statistical analysis. Systematic reviews are of highest quality. They are useful for healthcare professionals as well as for policy makers because it's evidence-based. Literature reviews, however, are just providing a summary and then they don't go to that extent. So in a nutshell, systematic reviews comprise of a small fraction of the total reviews published, but they are high in quality, unlike your traditional reviews. So these are the 4 parameters based on which we can discuss it out. Speed, the methodological detail, risk of bias, and comprehensiveness. Narrative reviews have the lowest of all these, scores when you try to rate them out because they are dependent on the research area. There are no methods, there is high risk of bias, and they are dependent on the author for comprehensiveness. But as you go from narrative review to systematic review with meta-analysis, the speed comes down drastically. They become slow, but though they become slow, they become highly specific with no risk of bias, and they are highly comprehensive. And thus you see that as this starts descending down, the accuracy and quality automatically increases as such. Then here are the review types and their summary. Systematic reviews, as we have discussed, I'm not going to repeat it out again, are specific. The time frame is 8 months to 2 years, and number of reviewers usually are multiple. A rapid review is for, it's like a fast track assessment of what's going on in the field and how it is. It just requires 2 to 6 months for making it, and number of reviewers are 2. A scoping review will give you an idea for the policymakers to take the decision and helps determining gaps in the research. Number of reviewers are less here. And a traditional review is just a general outline or a summary for it, which takes few weeks to finish. Not necessarily it's one reviewer, because generally when you publish, there are 2 reviewers. The maximum reviewers are for systematic review, followed by others as such. Then, Now we come to the next point, which is like how to write each of these reviews. In the bulk, I have discussed how to write about traditional reviews. Most of the framework goes well except for systematic, but there are certain small minor modifications when you talk of even other ones. So let us discuss it out and look at it. A scoping review, when you are writing it, this is the protocol that has to be followed. First, you should have a clear review topic, its objective, and sub-questions. The difference between a scoping review and a systematic review, as I said, both of them look at the data, both of them analyze it. But a systematic review gives a clear-cut answer. A scoping review doesn't give such a clear-cut answer. You develop a protocol. Then you apply the, what you call Prisma framework, sort of similar kind of a framework for systematic analysis. You do systematic searches, including gray literature. You screen the results and see which all meet your eligibility criteria and which do not meet. You extract the data, you write up your evidence in order to answer your question. Though you might not answer the question completely, you just give an idea of whether the purpose is met or not. That's it. Then, while writing scoping reviews, here are the points which you have to remember. A scoping review is more iterative than a traditional systematic review, because in a traditional systematic review, you follow a regular protocol. Here, you don't follow a regular protocol. It's like in meaning in systematic reviews, you have what are called as Prisma statements, which you make for how you are going to conduct evaluate the study. Here, you don't have that much. While that is acceptable, any changes and the rationale for these must be clearly articulated in methodology, because scoping review has the flexibility of changing the traditional, changing the protocols of systematic review. But if you're changing them, it's always wise that you mention why you are changing them and how you are changing them. Then argumentative reviews. If you are writing argumentative reviews, then you have to remember the following points. Make sure that you have the correct question. Make sure that your argument is valid. It has a proper reason for it. You support it with a proper viewpoint. You deal with the disagreements clearly. You have to be clear, concise, and you have to write a good essay. Writing argumentative reviews is not easy, because when you are writing the argumentative review, you are trying to prove your point that you're correct. So then when it goes for analysis and reviewing, people might say you're wrong. So it has to be a solid proof point to do the argumentative review as such. Then you have integrative reviews. When we talk of integrative reviews, they are different from systematic reviews because they include both experimental and non-experimental studies. It provides a synthesis of knowledge and applicability of results of significant studies to practice. So having said that, which is important, there is a protocol that is followed for writing integrative reviews. And the framework as how you write it is presented in these slides. Next slides. You have to give the objective, which is to present the phases of an integrative review and relevant aspects to be taken into account. So you have to give it clearly. What is exactly the purpose of this integrated review and why you are writing it. Then you have the methods which you have to put forth based on the literature available. You have to integrate the entire thing and say how the methods match or how they differ. Then you come to the results section. While presenting results for integrative review, there are 6 important points to be considered. First, you have to prepare the question, the guiding question. Then you have to explain how you are searching the literature. Then you have to talk about data collection. Then you have to talk about critical analysis of studies included, discussion of results, and presentation of the review. So all these points are important and you have to look for them. Then you come to the conclusions which you have to write. When you are concluding in an integrative review, you have to synthesize the various investigations which have been done on the given topic and the guidelines which have been given or suggested. You have to put it together and synthesize a new statement which you put forth as a conclusion in integrated reviews as such. Now, when you are writing theoretical literature reviews, unlike these other ones, the purpose of this is to put together the various theories which are associated with a specific concept or an issue. Now, the theoretical literature review establishes what theories already exist, what is the relationship between them, and can we develop a new hypothesis based on it. Though you might not become in a position to develop a completely new hypothesis, you try to propose something associated with it. There are 5 key steps, and the 5 key steps of theoretical literature review are identical to the ones for the traditional literature review. You first search for the relevant literature, you evaluate the sources, you identify themes, debates, and gaps, outline the structure, and write your literature review as such. Now, having said it, now we focus on systematic reviews, how to write the systematic reviews and how we go about with it. So, various steps involved in writing the systematic review includes, first, you have to formulate the research question. You develop the research protocol. The protocol that is developed is usually submitted to the Cochrane Library and you get approval for writing it. That is how a systematic review differs from traditional review. You get an approval for the protocol. Only after you get the approval for the protocol, you proceed ahead with it. You conduct the literature search, and once you do your literature search, you select the studies, you scan them based on eligibility criteria, and then you come out with the final list of the studies. From the final list of the studies, you extract the data, you analyze the data, and interpret results. So you have the Prisma flow sheets. If you want to do statistical analysis, you will be going on ahead with doing meta-analysis and further continuing with it as such. Then, these are the steps which are involved in writing systematic review. There are 3 steps: planning the review, conducting the review, and reporting the review. In planning review, you first formulate the problem. You develop and validate the review protocol. That's what I said. Validating the protocol is by submitting it to the Cochrane Library or to Campbell Collaboration so that they come back and tell you it's acceptable or not. Because when you are writing systematic reviews, it's very essential that it has to be first accepted. Otherwise, if the protocol is not accepted initially, you can't go ahead and write the review. Then you conduct the review. So that in one way you have a filter that you have to have an absolutely good protocol. Then you conduct the review, you search the literature, you screen for inclusion, assess the quality, extract data, analyze and synthesize. To narrow down the body of work, you review the first you review the title. Then based on it, you come down to selective papers for reviewing the abstract. Then you review the full text as such. Then once you do that, then you report the findings and you make the final systematic review. Now, this is the whole process. The process of systematic review writing is exhaustive. That's the reason why it needs 18 months to 2 years to finish and get it upgraded. Now, you first formulate the research question. You design the search strategy, you write the protocol, you get it approved, then you do the bibliographic database search, identify the possible papers, you retrieve the papers after identification, you check for inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then you get with the final list of papers, you extract the data, then you do quality appraisal of the data, then you synthesize, and then you formulate the research question and get out with the final conclusion of the story. So thus, it's very exhaustive and time consuming. So one has to be very careful when they are drafting the reviews. Now, how do you do literature search for systematic reviews? So the literature search for a systematic review can be done from 3 places. 1 is electronic sources, 2 is print sources, and 3 is grey literature. When you say electronic sources, they are databases, electronic libraries, mostly are from internet. Print sources include journals, textbooks, and hand searching of already previously published and those which are deposited in the libraries. And grey literature, the word in itself means that this is the literature which doesn't fall into these 2 categories. It is the one which includes conference proceedings and research funders. So means those who are like funding for the research, they also have some data based on which they have done it. So you use that also and you talk about it as well. So you can either use electronic sources, or you can use print sources, or you can do gray literature, and any of them could be useful for this. Usually it's a combination of all the three that you use. Now, this is a beautiful figure which explains how exactly do you collect the literature for systematic reviews. You have major ones, which includes Medline and Embase. Now, there's common, in the Venn diagram, the common one is overlapping between Medline and Embase. Now, Cochrane Library for systematic reviews and trials it merges with both, because it collects from both Medline as well as from Embase the systematic reviews and trials, and so it's very useful. Then you have MCare for allied health and nursing. Then you have Ovid at nursing. Then you have another one called CINAHL for nursing and allied health. Then you have psychology, mental health associated APA Psycho Info. Then Australia's Informate Health for health and social sciences. As you can see, many of them overlap with Medline and Embase. Some of them, like Informate as well as APA Psych Info, are only for Medline and they don't have access to Embase. So thus you can pick up from the selective ones, you can use them, and you can go ahead and you can get whatever literature you want. So having said that, once you have the data done, you can do systematic review or you can do meta-analysis. The representative image put forth here is for the hierarchy of the way it goes. Initial or the lowest at the pyramid are the animal research or lab studies, followed by case series, case reports, case control studies, cohort studies, randomized control trials, systematic reviews, and meta-analysis. Meta-analysis are like on the top of this pyramid, which represent the best part of it. Systematic reviews are the next best. The remaining and all are like the initial phases. So all of them are clubbed together and are done for being a part of the systematic review or meta-analysis. So the exact difference between systematic review or meta-analysis is given here in this particular table. You identify and critique the relevant research studies in systematic reviews. In meta-analysis, you not only just identify and you identify the studies, but not just it's criticizing is a part of it, but you collect the data using defined protocol from meta-analysis. You discuss factors that may explain heterogeneity in systematic reviews, whereas in case of meta-analysis, you go ahead and statistically test study the heterogeneity and investigate why is it originating, what are the variables that are contributing to heterogeneity. Then you synthesize knowledge in systematic reviews. Meta-analysis is not just synthesis of knowledge, it is a statement to policymakers as whether that particular given aspect can be considered or not. For example, if you are talking of a drug treatment in a cohort of population, can we do it or can we not do it? That will be answered by meta-analysis and not just by systematic review as such. So, having said that, we come to what are the important rules for consideration for writing literature review. There are 10 rules which I have listed out, which we discuss one after other. Rule 1, you have to define a topic and audience. The topic should be of interest to you. It should be one of the important aspects associated with the field. It should be well defined. And in many cases, once you define the topic, you define the audience automatically. Then, search and research the literature. Now, this is very important in case of literature review. You have to keep a track of the search items you use. Now, you should have annotated bibliography and a citation generator. So like Mendeley papers, Mendeley, Ovid, and Scopus and others you have there. Many of these databases from where you can pick up and make specific bibliographies as such. Keep a list of papers whose PDFs you don't have access so that you can get them later. Define early in the process what are the inclusion and exclusion criteria for papers. Though in traditional reviews it's not that important to define, but it is always good to have it. This goes more for systematic reviews. Now, don't just look into research papers in the areas you want, but also look for previous reviews which have been related to it, which are older. Sometimes you might get out with some important points from there as such as well. Uh, Then rule 3, take notes while reading. This is the most important thing. You have to take notes as you are reading, because it's impossible to remember. Every time you read if you read 50 papers, you can't remember what you have read in the first paper. So because it's difficult to have such a good memory, unless your memory is amazing, you collect notes and keep them. While reading, write down the interesting pieces of information, insights about how to organize, and thoughts on what to write. In this way, by the time you have read the literature reviews of various papers, you'll make the body of the literature. So that's one of the beautiful tips. All the notes combined, you'll get what you want. So then, rule 4, choose the type of review you wish to write. So first, you have to decide what you want even before you're writing. Is it a mini review? Is it a full-time review? Is it a review for thesis? Is it a review for what do you call dissertation? Is it a systematic review, or is it a traditional review? What is that you want? For which discipline is it and how it is? Then you can go ahead and write as how you want it out. Then rule 5, keep the reviews focused but make it of broad interest, meaning whether you are writing a mini review or full review, the focus is the most important thing, because when you are presenting it to the reader must have a focus. For example, how epidemiological approaches are used in modeling the spread of ideas. In this case, you have to talk about both epidemiology as well as you have to talk about spread of the ideas, which includes cultural aspects, cultural diffusion. So you have to have papers from both, integrate and write. You can't write both separately, but connecting papers have to be there. While focus is the most important feature of the review, it has to be balanced with the relevance to the broad audience. If you know what the target audience, then you don't worry. If your target audience is very broad, then it should also be, going on ahead with the broad audience. Now, be critical and consistent. That is rule 6. That is a feature of a very good review. You don't just summarize the literature, but you discuss it critically. You identify the drawbacks and identify the research gaps. So after having read a review of literature, the reader should get an idea of what is the achievement of this reviewed article in the field. What is the area that he's addressing? What is the research question? And what is the research gap based on which the question has come into existence. Then, important rules for consideration. Rule 7, you find a logical structure. A good review has a number of telling features, which is it is attention seeking, it is systematic, it is well written, focused, critical. You have a general introduction of context, a properly organized body, and a proper conclusion. For systematic reviews, there is a trend towards including information about how the literature was searched. Now, that is unique for them, which is important because systematic reviews are not like regular reviews. So, that is how you need to have it out. Then, the next important point is make use of the feedback. Rule 8. Once you write the review, you have corrected it, you have edited it, you got it edited already, then you have to give it to reviewers so that they read and tell you. It's most of the times we don't spot out the inaccuracies, inconsistencies, and ambiguities. But it's the other person who can make it out. So feedback is vital to writing a good review, and it should be sought of from colleagues so that you can get a diverse view on whatever you have written. Then, next point is include your own relevant research but be objective. Many a times it happens that researchers unduly dismiss their own achievements, which is not correct. If you have already published reviews or papers in that field or the topic you're trying to write the review, you can always cite them as long as it is not objecting to, it is not like you are trying to advertise yourself. That's the most important point. If a reviewer is up to the job of producing a well organized and methodological review which flows well and provides a service to readership, then it is very well worth to put it. But don't try to put anything wherein which you're trying to do, advertise that you have done the best work. It should go with the flow, and it should not be like something advertising yourself as such. Then the last rule is be up to date, but do not forget older studies. First of all, up to date meaning you should have a collection of the papers, whatever have been published till the date of writing review. And when you submit the review also, before submitting also, if there are any papers which are in the press, if they have not been published, because they take months to get published, you get the preprints of them. And then, you try to read, evaluate, and incorporate them. On other hand, if there are any what you call papers which have done of great significance from older studies, you can include them because they have been the phase changers in the particular field as such. Then these are the points which you need to remember while writing the literature review. You ensure sources are not too old in sciences, in life sciences. Always clear doubts about sources before writing. So be clear of what you are including and how you are including. Summarize and plan your ideas perfectly. Refer to different literature review writing styles and see where it fits, whether it's a theoretical, whether it's integrative, whether it's argumentative. What exactly is your review and how it is? So you go ahead, you look for all these things, and then you write. So then, what are the features of a good review? Now, here are the features of a good review. These aspects have to be remembered by all participants because these are the ones on the basis of which a reviewer will judge you. The review return should be unbiased, meaning you are not trying to support anyone. It should be accurately referenced. You should include all the possible references, the most recent of the citations. Papers in press also should be included. It should be critical. You should have evaluated it critically as what it is and how it is. Then it should be organized and systematically done. It should be comprehensive, meaning it should have a nutshell summary of the entire thing. It should be rigorous, exploratory, and clearly expressed. So these are some of the important points. In continuation, it should be informative to the reader. It should be balanced. You should have both agreements as well as disagreements. It should be insightful, meaning you are not just trying to do the literature survey, but you're also giving insights of what you think. It should have what you call focus, and it should have include all the relevant ones, references. It should be explicit, transparent, coherent, and evaluative, which meaning all these points which I have mentioned mean one thing, that it should be clear, concise, and well written, and it should be what you call, it should be in such a way that it shows that you have good knowledge in the field, and it should be well interconnected so that the reader gets an idea of what we are talking of and how it is. So thus, in general, the literature review that you have or that you write will be very helpful in such a way. So if you follow the various instructions that I have mentioned today, it will be very useful for you. In case if you are looking for any of the writing and editing services for literature review, we are available here at Research Graduate. You can get on the website or WhatsApp or even on the info@researchgraduate.com. So having said that, I end the webinar on research on literature review writing. We are now live for question answer session. So I request all the participants to pose your questions and I'll try to answer them as many as possible. Do not much worry if any of your questions are missed. We will come back to you if you write to us. So you can post your questions in the chat box and I'm here to answer them. Now, Sudhakar has a question. If some 100 papers, articles relevant to selected PhD topic and research question are combined, and if all of them broadly cover 2 or 5 themes, then is it necessary to critically review or write on each of them, or a summary of those 3 themes enough for mentioning the research gap? Yeah, Sudhakar, if the theme is common or centralized, you can use the theme and you can mention the research gap. You don't have to summarize each of them. For mentioning the research gap, the theme is enough. While writing the body of the literature, also, you write the literature rotating around the theme and you interconnect all the papers. Sumant Kashyap says, what are the disadvantages of theoretical reviews? As I have said, theoretical reviews are just collecting the various theories that you have, but you can't come out with a definitive answer for any question. You are just interconnecting the theories and saying this is the field. Now, Dr. Manoj Kumar Sahu says, dear sir, now there is a box system. Manish Kumar says, my research topic is big data. Is in big data modeling and analytics are same or not? Manish, I do not have much idea of it. We might have to look at it and see whether it is same or not. Kavita says, can it be written in first chapter of the thesis? No, Kavita. The first chapter of thesis is introduction. Your second chapter will be literature review. Usually you can't club literature review with introduction. It comes as a separate chapter. Ashish says, literature based with statistical method is applied to given trend. How it should be? Literature based with statistical method is applied to given trend. How it should be? Then if you are putting statistical method to it, it could be more like a systematic review with meta-analysis, as what I understand, Ashish. You can proceed with that and you can use it. Rajveer Singh says, I want to publish my research paper in Scopus Index Journal. My area of research is English literature. My paper is ready. May I get some help in this aspect? Tejaswini can answer this question better. So just revert back to her and she will tell you if we can do it or not. Meman Salma Abdul Ghaffar says, sir, how to select topic in education subject? Meman, education subject is too broad. Do you know what exactly do you want, or you have to figure out what is that you want in education? Then we can select the topic for you. Dr. Manoj Kumar Sahu says, dear sir, now there is a box system of writing literature reviews followed. How can we do it? I didn't exactly get you, Manoj. Dr. Manoj, what is box system? You mean to say the Prisma sheet wherein which you use for the clinical reviews? Yeah, that you could use it only for them. Otherwise, for normal literature reviews, I'm not aware of it. If there is anything like that, then even I have to go through it. Banka Srinivasulu says, is traditional review preferable for psychology? Yeah, it depends on the aspect. What is that you are looking at? If you have data in it and you want to summarize, then it can't be traditional review. But if it is not data-wise, then a traditional review will be sufficient and more than enough. Imsunero says, how much is enough for small article in English language studies? There is nothing like how much is enough. If you know which paper or where you want to publish it out, Imsunero, then in that case, you can see if you want to publish a mini article, how much will you be needing and how you will be needing. Now, Farhad says, how many literature reviews shall be in PhD thesis? There is no end to it. You can have anywhere between 100 to 200 papers, Farhad. But the more the number of papers you start writing, you go to more older papers. So you should check out based on your discipline if it is acceptable or not. Now, Sabrin says, can you please suggest some good publishing sources which accept literature review papers on economics? I am not sure of it, Sabrin, but I can tell you that you could go back and look at PubMed or database, or just go to Google Scholar and get out with various indexed journals for economics to publish, and so you will get it done easily in that way. Sudhakar says, before finalizing on taking services with RG, please allow me to have a short telecon interaction with you, sir, because we have been following your excellent guidance with clarity. Thanks. Well, Sudhakar, if you wish to do that, you contact Tejasvi, you come out with your proposal with her, and then they are the ones who decide what and how it needs to be done. Now, Sudhakar says, sir, do RG services include infrastructure management and engineering like aviation and airport sustainability? Well, I am not sure of it. Please ask Tejasvi and she can answer that to you better. You can write back to RG and they will tell you if they have any such thing or not. Now, Lubna says, sir, how can we come to know but which literature will go for our research article? Well, that was one of the points I was telling. To know it, you need to have a topic, you need to have keywords. Then, if you have finalized the topic and the keywords, then you can go ahead with the appropriate literature, Lubna. Sudhakar says, research studies and papers get updated year after year, including new theories and modern methods. Then why a chronological review starting with most recent years and going to are not considered appropriate and better? Now, let me tell you one thing, Sudhakar. I don't know which field exactly you are from, but chronological reviews are more for historians or more for humanities, wherein which you are looking for evolution of a specific topic. In that case, chronological are good. But if you are having, every time that there is upgradation and it's going on in that way, chronology might not make sense. You might have to go for other ones like thematic and others. Khulaut says, in humanities, how long it should be? Well, any of the research review articles you want to write, you can't go more than 15 years. Kavita, how much length of literature review is required in thesis of humanities? Humanities, you can write more, Kavita. So your literature review could be extensive. It depends on how much is the length of your thesis and word count for thesis. Nimalka says, could you give me an example for thematic? Now, thematic, for example, the concurrent theme we are talking of. If the theme here, for example, if in all the literature reviews, whatever you have the papers collected, if the idea or theme is what is the brand value for a specific component, and that is the theme which is going on everywhere, then you can rotate around brand value and you can write. Then Muhammad Menon says, how do we know the paper has high number of citations? Google Scholar, Scopus, Elsevier, all of them have citation index. Feed in the paper, you'll get to know the citation automatically. Sabrine says, I was not able to join. I was just now able to open it. Please send me the video so that I can go through. Yeah, you will get that, Sabrine. Lubna says, how much research papers we have to go through for reference and to start writing? First you collect and you start writing. Then you will know what is relevant and what is irrelevant, based on which you can discard whichever you don't need. Now, Berkey Mashika says, can keywords influence negatively or positively and affect literature review? It's nothing like keywords will affect it negatively or positively. If your keywords have not been framed properly and they are out of scope, then you are collecting papers which have no relevance. However, if they are within scope, then there is no problem as such. Ganesh, from where can we get public health related researcher? You should have it in PubMed. If you go to PubMed or go to Google Scholar and give your specific topic, and you will get to know immediately. Deepak Panda says, how to know that we have collected enough of all the literatures for topic? There is nothing like enough, unfortunately, Deepak. That's never ending collection of literature. You have to decide at a given point what is enough for you and what is not. Berkey Mashika says, please come back at the end on how to get keyword. You were quickly answering. Okay, Berkey. What I said was, no keyword is negative or positive. It is in fact based on how you have drafted the keyword. Now, if your keyword is not in the scope of the topic, you will collect literature which is out of your, survey area. If it is done properly, you collect it within survey area. So it's drafting your keyword which makes it negative or positive. Job John says, students studying in MSW, what are the useful topics for research work and dissertation? I don't know what exactly is MSW, John. Can you just tell me what is it? Then maybe I can suggest you if I'm aware of it. Then LS, Dr. Srinivas is highly informative and methodical. Thanks, LS. Dr. Om Raj says, I think all these types of literature reviews are related to each other. Thanks so much, because this is the first time I'm seeing, or like very rare instances wherein which I see participants are so involved that they get the gist of the whole thing. All the literature reviews are interrelated except for systematic reviews. The classification of traditional reviews that you have, whatever you call, are highly interrelated. So the whole set goes into two parts: traditional and systematic. That's what I have been repeating so many times while talking. In fact, it's a nice way that Dr. Om has got it very well. Redmi says, thank you, the research group. Now I can hear too. Ashok says, I'm not getting quotation for various services you provide, even after having communication many times. That you check with RG and they can help you out. Now, Berkey Masheka says, it will be worth to explain each types of literature review and says how they are working. Now, we have given you explanation, Berkey. The problem here is that in a given stipulated time, we have to cover them, because we can't go on giving details for only one of them, because that doesn't come within the scope of, doing the webinar. Then Berkey says, can you please clarify a literature review? Then we yes, yeah. Sabrine says, can we just combine the theoretical, empirical, and come up with gap and write a review? You can do it. You want to identify a research gap, you can combine it in the way you want and you can publish it. It doesn't matter. Abdul Salam says, sir, I want to publish in UGC care listed, but I want it by the end of this for my pre-submission. Help me. So RG is here. You can talk to them and then they will go through and see if they can help you out. Sangram says, can we register our PhD through research graduate? That is not possible, Sangram. Research graduate is here to help you, but not to register for your PhD. You have to register your PhD through your appropriate university, which is acknowledged by the government. We are here to help you, but I don't think we can do that as part of the registration. You can check with RG and then they will tell you if it is feasible or not. But my understanding says it is not feasible, as at least. Kavita says, if chapters are already done and can't be a separate chapter, well, Kavita, when you are making chapters for the thesis, you have literature review as a separate chapter. I think you're not able to figure it out where it is. Yes, so if you can send us the chapters, we can look back and dissect out which chapter is what also. Just look in, you will have literature review in it. Then V. Maniteja says, my research topic is epidemiology of cardiovascular risk factors on left ventricular dysfunction. Who can search for related articles regarding my research topic? Well, just see if you should be in a position to find them. If still not, you write to us. Let us see if we can help you out in any ways there. Alex Conjuju says, Sir Srinivas, can you provide materials as examples of different forms? As I have said, for the different forms of literature review, it sometimes becomes difficult to keep giving examples because we have limited time for the webinar. Maybe we can look in the next time to see if we can give examples and work it out. Parthada says, how do I decide which type of review is best? My study is related to the use of usual metaphor in advertisement. Well, you just collect your literature. If you are not able to find which type of review is the best, if you don't have data, then you can use a direct one. You can use traditional review. Georgiana says, helpful webinar, congratulations. I'm curious in your opinion, the length is directly proportional with relevancy of your paper. Can a short review be as much helpful as a 30-page review if you structure your info well and efficient? Yeah, 30-page review and a short review, yes, they could be equivalent. That depends on how you could draft it, Georgiana, and how you pack the information so that it makes a punch for the reader and he understands it very well. Kavita says, please respond if chapters are already done. Yeah, I have answered this already. Kafi says, will you have a special webinar about literature review in applied linguistics? I am not sure about it because we need to have a proper person for it, but you can check with RG if it is possible. Subhash says, is there any minimum articles required for systematic review publication? I have only 5 articles after doing Prisma. I think 5 is too limited. After doing Prisma, maybe your exclusion criteria is too stringent. Try to relax it and you might have more, or you would have to broaden your inclusion criteria. Either of them, change your criteria, you'll get out more. Harendranath says, I had already published 1 paper for data mining. I need another paper. I need help. Write to RG and they'll help you. Subhash CK say, no, that I have answered already. Kholod says, if the PhD thesis are more or less covered in 200 pages, so literature review, how many pages it should be? Well, it can go on. If you have 200 pages, you can easily write a literature review of 30 to 40 pages at least. It's a huge one, but yes, you can do it. Kafi says, will you have a special webinar about? Okay. Then Debajit, which kind of review is more convenient for social science related thesis, specifically for archaeology? If you are doing archaeology, you can do a chronological review, Debajit, because it deals with past and then with the present. So you can have a chronological assessment. Sam Kutti says, thank you for the detailed session. For literature review, Mendeley is said to be helpful. How to use it? It's a free website, web-based. Download it. It will automatically guide you as how to use it. Ashish says, how to give increased citation to own paper in same domain. How to increase citation to own paper? If you want to increase citation to own paper, if you have already published it, you have to wait. If you want to publish it, then you can have papers which have been already published and landmark included in it so that people will connect it with those papers because you have cited that landmark paper, and so you'll have more citations. Praveen M. Pathrakar says, what number of reviews are needed for PhD thesis? Depends upon. You can have as many as you can. For PhD, there is no limit, but you just check. You can add as many as possible. Sachitra Edrisinghe says, dear professor, thank you for showing what it is. Many academics show literature review as very difficult and followers many get fed up or scared. Thanks again. Thanks, Sachitra, if we are able to, clear your fears about it. And that's great to hear that you got ideas from here. Muhammad Meenan says, should we have to enter our published paper in the Google Scholar to know about number of citations? One way of doing it is that. Otherwise, you can use the PubMed ID and track it down for the citations. Suresh Kumar says, I'm doing PhD in zoology literature. I'm very much interested in butterflies. Sir, tell me writing about introduction. Well, Suresh, you contact back RG and then we'll see how to go with it and how to do it. If you have more questions, please post them because I'm waiting here to answer your questions. We are left only with a few more minutes of answering the questions, maybe around 6-7 minutes. So if you can post it, then I will answer them out. Sir, I want to publish my research paper in Scopus Indexed Active Journal. My area of research is English literature. Can I get ready? Yeah, I have already seen that, Rajveer. You can contact RG and they will tell you how to go. Then I have answered Praveen's question already when Dr. Manoj Kumar Sahu's. I am not aware of the box system, what he's talking of. If you can get it to me done more, then I can help you out. Ashish says literature based with statistical method is applied to give trends. So you could go for systematic or meta-analysis as well. So, Sangram says, can we get the direct information from social medias from their surveys? Yeah, you can get, you have to cite those medias and the surveys, then it will be logical. Yeah, Praveen, I answered your question as how many reviews. That depends on what is the length of your thesis and how many pages it is. Now, Dr. Lavanya says, sir, better review can be done from library or Google. You can do both, Lavanya. You can also do, actually, Google is easier nowadays because nobody goes to library and everything is online as such. Lubna says, how can we choose correct form of literature review for writing review paper? The correct form of literature review will depend upon what it is. So you identify whether it's traditional or systematic, and then you can see. Now, Sonam says, I'm doing PhD in English literature. I'm very much interested in Buddhist philosophy in Theravada and Mahayana. Is it possible for me to publish journals in Buddhism? I have no clue of that, Sonam, because I am not belonging to that field. You might have it, but you have to, search for it and then get it done. Jasmine says, is there any matrix format to consolidate many reviews? Unfortunately, I am not aware of it, Jasmine, that there is a matrix format. If you have to look for it, but I have no idea of it. You have to manually curate and get it done. Then Dr. Manoj Kumar Sahu says, before describing literature review was conducted, but now we are writing it in rows and before descriptive literature review was conducted, but now we are writing it in a row and column, year finding conclusion. So what's the system? So what's this system? Okay, Dr. Sahu, I think you're talking about systematic analysis because that's where you have in many cases. Traditional also has. Okay, let me tell you one point that though you summarize it in a descriptive manner, what happens is when you are publishing the review, people it's easy for people to follow a tabular format, year, author, paper, and the major observation, so that they'll go through it. Later, they'll come back to the subject and read it, because many a times readers don't have to time to read the whole description. They'll go through the table as such. So probably in that way, you have to make it, because when we write the literature reviews as such, we also do it out in that way. So if you have any further questions to all the participants, we are almost coming to an end here. Before I end it, points to be noted. The participation certificate will be emailed today between 5 and 6 p.m. You'll get the recording by 2:45. Please check your email and star emails for important and future correspondences. Now, having said that, thanks for attending this webinar. It has been very good to listen to all of your doubts and solving your queries. Here are the various references which have been put forth and which you have. And then a huge round of thanks for attending the webinar. Please look into your emails regularly, because we are going to post about the next webinar shortly. And I hope all of you have enjoyed this webinar and it was useful. If any doubts or queries are left, and for anyone it has not been done, we will be in a position to answer you back, if you write back the queries to us. So having said it, I'm almost getting done. There are only like 1 or 2 minutes left. So please post in if any questions are there. In the last 2 minutes, I'll try to answer if there is anything. Yes, so there is someone here by name Isuru. What review system would be more advantageous in terms of legal research? In terms of legal research, I would rather say it could be more theoretical, because you don't come out with newer hypothesis much there. That is what is my assumption, but it might not be true also. But I think theoretical one or an integrative one would be more suitable, Isru. Then Alex Says Sir Srinivas, can you provide materials? Yeah, I answered your question, Alex, already that, we could do it out, but then we need to do it differently because in the given time frame, we need to cover a number of aspects which caters to large number of participants. Yeah. So then, yeah, Kavita, I responded to your answer that though you have done your chapters, one of your chapters will be having literature review already. I think you are missing it out. You re-go through your whole written chapters, then you can reframe the chapters and get out as what you want. Harendranath says how to find which was the high citation index. The citation index can be found out based on the Google Scholar as well as from Scopus. You will get an idea of what you want. Then I think that we are almost reaching this end of the webinar. It's the last minute that we have. So if you have anything, you let me know. Iskandar Al-Ghitmi says, can you help in writing and outlines the structure of creating a new fellowship program? Well, it depends on which field it is and how it is. You drop in your queries with RG and then they will let you know whether it is suitable or not. Sangram says, can we get recent topics from Google? Yes, we can. Can you, okay, then Kavita says, could you send me an example of literature review in English literature? That we have to see. Right now, I don't have. But yes, you drop a query to us and we will see. So then, okay, having said it, thanks one for attending the webinar. See you at the next webinar. So then we will inform you about the next webinar shortly. So please look for through your emails as when it is. Thank you very much for all the participants, and again, a warm good afternoon.